Welcome to the Growing in Love for Life podcast, where it's all about saving and strengthening your marriage and creating the relationship you really deserve and want to have. And now, from growinginloveforlife.com, relationship and marriage coach and best-selling author, your host, Liam Naden.
This is episode 22 of the Growing in Love for Life podcast. Hi everyone, it's Liam Naden here. Welcome back to this episode of our podcast. And just a reminder, of course, that these podcasts are now happening every 2 weeks rather than every week. As I explained in the last podcast, my time is just getting a little bit taken up with helping people in my Save Your Marriage program, and of course these people are my priority, and I still want to bring you some real quality information in these podcasts, so they do take me a bit of time to put together, and I want to continue to be able to put the time into these podcasts. So anyway, this week I want to talk about something which I've called the essential ingredient for saving and strengthening your marriage. And I was thinking about this because so many people contact me or they join my Save Your Marriage program who are really desperate to save your marriage. And maybe you're in this situation, but these are people who are usually experiencing all sorts of problems and they're very unhappy. So, the communication might have broken down with their spouse, totally. Or all the love and intimacy might have gone from their relationship, and it could even be at the stage where their husband or their wife or even themselves is having an affair, or at least thinking about having an affair anyway. So people are obviously wanting a solution, and they want their marriage to be happy again. They want their husband or their wife to be in love with them again. They want an affair, if that's what's happening. They want that to stop. They want their problems to stop, and they want to go back to having a happy marriage. And I'm sure you're probably in that situation if you're listening to this as well. But there are a couple of things that I've really noticed, and that is, firstly, that most people are only willing to do something about saving and strengthening their marriage when things have reached a crisis point. In other words, when they're looking at their marriage ending, like if not immediately, then very, very soon. And it could be that their spouse has told them they want to leave, or they've had enough, or that they're having an affair, or the person is frightened that their spouse is going to have an affair if it hasn't already. So that's the first thing. Most people are only willing to do something when things have reached a crisis point. And the second thing is they want, and in fact they even expect, that they can save their marriage, solve all of their problems, make things happy again like they used to be, virtually overnight. So they want to stop their spouse from leaving. They want to stop the affair. They want to be happy again, and they want it now. But if you're in the situation where you think your marriage could end very soon, this podcast has got some really good ideas for you, and I hope and I'm pretty sure they can be of a big help. And if you're not in the situation that your marriage is looking like ending soon, if you're not in an absolute crisis point right now, but things are still going downhill for you, and you don't like where things are heading, then I think you're also going to get a lot of value from the things I'm sharing here. But if you're not in a crisis situation, there's one thing I'll add, and that is, please don't leave it until you are in a crisis situation. Don't leave it until the last minute to do something to improve your marriage and sort out your problems. Because the sooner you do something, the easier it is, and it's much easier as well. So if you're in that situation, also please consider joining my Save Your Marriage Relationship Transformation program, because it's not just for people whose marriage is just about to go off the cliff. In fact, some of the best results I've had with the program have been with people who got to work on their marriage when they started to feel that things weren't right. And when you're in that situation, it's so much easier to get things back on track again. But either way, whether your marriage is in an immediate crisis point or not, I think you're going to find what I'm going to share with you today is pretty interesting, and my hope is that it's useful to you as well, obviously. So let's get started with looking at what I think is the essential ingredient for saving and strengthening your marriage. Now, if you've listened to any of my earlier podcasts, and and it's amazing to me in a way. We're up to episode number 22 already. But if you've listened to any of the early ones, you'll know that I believe there are really only two things to do if you want to save your marriage and to turn it into the only sort of marriage worth having, which is a great one. And the first thing is, you have to find out the wrong things that you have been doing, and you have to stop doing them. That's the first thing. Find out what the wrong things are and stop doing them. And secondly, find out what the right things are to improve your marriage, to save it, to strengthen the relationship between you and your spouse, to stop the pain, stop the problems. Find out what the right things are that you haven't been doing, or that perhaps you used to do and you've stopped doing. So find out what those things are and start doing them.